Okay, this is a screencast explaining to you in a little bit more detail how to go about doing the Creative Digital Citizenship Project for our class. There's two components to this. One is a presentation, a media presentation, and the other component is a reflective essay. This is the project which for this course you will be uploading into live text at the end of our course. It's your culminating project which will reflect your learning throughout this 8-week course. It involves creating a media representation to show how you have used this learning to implement with your students different kinds of lessons that reflect 21st century skills and the elements of digital citizenship. So you have now done at least 2 lessons with your students that focus on digital citizenship, and those lessons obviously had 21st century skills involved. So in addition to creating a presentation that reflects your learning and its impact on your students' learning, you will also include in this presentation student or peer interviews. By peer interviews, we do mean people perhaps in our class or colleagues in your school. You include surveys that were administered to your students and the results of those surveys, as well as your reflection on your classroom practice and how you were able to apply your learning in this course to your classroom practice and how that has influenced your students. In addition, for live text, you have to indicate the demographic population of students you work with. So if you look below, you can see the areas we're focusing on in terms of diversity. And these are the areas. Okay, and I would seem that all of you will be able to, within your own school setting, address those demographic details and show how those are included when you need to go into live text to indicate that information. Now, so what I'm going to do is walk you through the criteria and explain to you a little bit more about each of the criteria. The first 2 criteria have to do with diversity. And so you are here describing the target student population and providing evidence of how you were able to obtain that information about your students. So what were your data sources for finding out that information? And that could be through district or school records. Okay, now you are going to describe in detail student learning and the needs of your students in terms of that target population that you have addressed here in the diversity area. Now, diversity doesn't just mean ethnic diversity, but that can be individual students' learning needs and could be issues like English language learners or students with special education needs. Okay, going down to knowing your students, you are going to want to justify the objectives of what you have been teaching your students based on your learning in this course, based on what you have provided in these 2 areas regarding student diversity. You're also going to want to show how what you've implemented in your classroom fits in with the students' learning levels and their background information. So you want to show you understand your students in terms of the challenges they face and how you have adapted the lessons to those needs. In terms of knowing content, this is showing that the objectives that you have set out for your lessons address the skills that are expected and the concepts that are expected for that content area and for the students of that grade level and age. In terms of Common Core standards or content standards, some of you teach in disciplines where Common Core standards is not applicable, so you will want to focus on grade level content standards and unit goals as set by the curriculum guides, either through your professional organizations or through your district's curriculum guides. In terms of teaching here, we want to know that you have used appropriate and varied procedures to differentiate instruction and to provide meaningful feedback to your students. And we also want to see that you've allowed opportunities for your students to somewhat serve in a teaching role, and this could be through collaborative work they do in small groups, for instance, or presentations that they might be giving in class. In terms of technology, it's assumed in a course like this that you will apply the learning of contemporary technologies in your classroom, but you want to see that you've used these technologies to differentiate instruction and the kinds of assessment you provide to your students. In terms of assessment, we want to know what criteria you use to assess your students and how you went about seeing if the outcomes of the student learning fit your objectives and was also a way for you to provide feedback to address the diversity of students in your classroom setting. In terms of data, this is a case where you need to provide some student examples of learning and examples of the kind of feedback you provided to students and what criteria you used for that feedback. Now, we do ask that you're providing feedback not just to students, but in some ways to parents of those students. And there's various ways that you can do that. For parents, for instance, you might be putting information on a website. You might be sending them some kind of electronic communication in another fashion. It's also possible that you might be providing feedback to the community at large. So we want to know, how are you providing feedback not just to the students, but to other people involved, such as parents and the community. In terms of impact on student learning, we're looking here again to see that the conclusions that you arrive at based on what you've implemented in your teaching and in your classroom have addressed differentiation. And that, of course, would go back to the information you provided earlier about diversity. So look back at the first two categories here, and how has your feedback addressed that kind of diversity, okay? And what conclusions and insights can you provide regarding providing differentiated feedback to students and showing that your knowledge of your students has allowed you to arrive at insights concerning their learning based on the students' diversity and differentiating instruction. The next categories really have to do with reflective practice and future teaching using your learning and what happened in your classroom in planning for the future. So assuming you are going to do these lessons again, possibly next year, or do extensions of them coming up in the next few months, this would be an opportunity to reflect on that. So what will be your future learning objectives depending upon what you saw as the outcomes of what you have now done in terms of addressing the standards for your particular unit of study or the goals within the curriculum where you're teaching district-wide, school-wide, or if Common Core standards apply. Here is a chance now for you to reflect on how you can improve your own personal practice. So what might you do in the future based on what you have learned and implemented in the last few weeks to improve your practice in the future? Okay, here's an opportunity to discuss how you can use your professional practice to influence, in general, what you'll do in the future, as well as influencing other people. In other words, almost acting as an agent of change to bring about positive changes in your school setting or district-wide. Here you're going to be working on using student examples to show how you are going to use that information to develop a logical plan for the future. What you can use from your student data, for instance, to improve upon or repeat the successes of what you've done now. So areas of need would be what you might do to improve in the future and how you might make some adjustments to your planning in the future. In terms of rigors of mind here, we want to see that you have in-depth knowledge of your content area and can analyze and synthesize the content and relate it to how you have implemented concepts in this course to your own teaching. And here again, in terms of agent of change, we want to see how you can use your learning and your expertise to influence others and share that expertise with others. This might be people in your school setting, as well as your own peers in our class. So I hope that this screencast has helped you a little bit more in understanding the outcomes for this assignment. I suggest really looking at this third column, Target 3, as you're putting together your presentation and your final reflective essay. Down below, we have some information here regarding NCATE standards as well as National Board of Professional Teaching Standards. So you could use some of the terminology here and some of the suggestions as you go through creating your presentation and as you go through writing your reflective essay. So I hope this screencast has provided you with some more details, and of course remember to ask questions in class. Use our Google community, use Voxer, and use other formats to ask questions about this final culminating project. Please keep in mind that at session 7 of our class, you will be showing us your presentation, and at session 7, you will be uploading your presentation and your reflective essay into your digital portfolio. So do be working ahead. So you'll have that information ready for session 7. Not everybody might have a chance to present at session 7, so even if you present at session 8, you still should have everything ready for session 7, so we can get this project all wrapped up neatly before our last class session, and you could receive the necessary feedback in the event you want to make any adjustments before our final class. So thank you for listening, and I hope this screencast has been helpful to you.